friend, the noble Viscount, makes a very strong point. He makes a very strong point. I am deeply concerned at the growing rift between Parliament and the people, with the refusal to accept the people's judgment, whether you agree with it or not. Very clear judgment on the referendum. And I think that there is a real danger that undesirable but very often understandable insurrectionary forces will be feel that they cannot trust the British Parliament, they cannot trust the British Constitution, and a very ugly situation could well arise. So my noble friend is absolutely right.
Yeah.
My Lords, I hadn't planned to speak, but I am moved, literally moved. I have to tell you what my feelings are. I've spent 55 years teaching and studying law, including constitutional law. And if you want to know how effective I am, I have had in my lectures the noble Baroness Chakrabarti, and the former Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Well, you could have done better.
Yeah. Now we know.
Yes. And
now we know.
Now, did you have any good pupils?
And the noble Lord Paddock. Right?
That's better.
Now, the point about studying law, and probably many people in this House have or have practiced as lawyers, is that you internalise respect for the rule of law. The noble Lord Lawson explained about us not having a written constitution, and it only works because of trust. Why do we accept the authority of the Lord Speaker, whoever he or she may be? Why do we accept the rulings of the clerks, disguised as they are in their wigs? Because we trust them, and because this has gone on for centuries. It's not a question of personalities, it is a question of the role that they fill. And we take an oath every session, standing over there, to be loyal to the Queen, but also, I think, implicitly, to uphold the law. Why do judges not interfere with the proceedings of Parliament? I think there is no question of anyone challenging this law if it goes through today, because the judges accept that Parliament deserves their trust. We trust the judges and they trust Parliament. And if that breaks down, the whole system breaks down. And not only is the Constitution being damaged today and trashed, we have been subjected to gagging orders. I speak now because I thought if I wait another 5 minutes, there will be yet another motion to stop us talking anymore.
Grateful for the noble lady giving way, my noble friend. I wonder if she could categorise in terms of respect for constitutional convention and order a government which is defeated in the House of Commons by 230 votes and just carries on, and then has another vote on the same thing and is defeated by 180 and then carries on. Is that not a little odd in terms of practice?
It is not unconstitutional because it lies in the power of the House of Commons to put an end to that situation, if they wish to, by getting rid of the Prime Minister or passing the withdrawal agreement. But we are suffering from a lack of trust, which is about to come upon us, as I said. The constitutional damage may be irreversible, and I just want to add that there's been a lot of loose talk about sovereignty and Parliament taking control. We do not have our sovereignty. We gave it up in part when we joined the EU. We will not recover it until we leave. And at the moment, we are like prisoners rattling the cage, while outside the warders have the keys. We can debate all we like here, but we can see from this bill that the EU 27 will tell us what to do. And what's the point of a delay and devising this and that when they have said they won't alter the withdrawal agreement and the power lies with them? And I'm sorry to say that I blame this breakdown in respect for the Constitution in part on the EU. The effect of the EU has been to preside over judicial corruption across Europe, to preside over financial mismanagement and lack of accountability in Brussels, to have allowed creeping right-wing extremism across Europe, to allow the appointment of Juncker when we didn't want it, to accept the appointment of Selmayr, apparently breaking all the rules that there are. And this disregard for the Constitution, for the rules that the EU itself lays down, which are flagrantly disobeyed by Poland and Hungary and others, is now lapping round our ankles. And unless we uphold the Constitution by following every little bit of our rules today, albeit you might require people to be brief in their remarks, as I will be, the damage will be incredible. And people out there who respect us, who respect the law, who don't need to be whipped into submission or coerced, or who disobey police and the rule of law, they will wonder why they too have internalized the legal system if we can't do it. We have to believe in our own legal system and our own procedure.
Considerable sympathy with the amendments, but the reason I will not be supporting any of them is precisely because we are in a position where the government has failed to be able to deal with the Brexit referendum. The constitutional problem started there, and to suggest that we should not deal with procedures today is misguided, because we've got to deal with the crisis that is developing in this country. We need to get this legislation through, and we need to be able to work with the House of Commons in order to be able to try and resolve a constitutional mess that was caused by the referendum in the first place.
It's following upon the speeches of my noble friend Lord Lawson and the noble Baroness Deitch, both of whom have referred to the fact that we have, and we've always regarded it as one of our glories, we have an unwritten constitution. That has its risks. And in a situation, in a set of circumstances where a country has an unwritten constitution, the safeguards of our liberties lie with our conventions, our precedents, and our procedures. An unwritten constitution only works if the institutions of government respect those conventions, those procedures, and those precedents. Now, under an unwritten constitution, the House of Commons has very great power. But the House of Commons should exercise that power with constraint, with circumspection, with respect for those conventions, those procedures, and those precedents. The noble Lord Newby, the leader in this House of the Liberal Democrats, says that breach of those conventions, practices, procedures is justified because we're in a state of national crisis. He will know that that is the pretense which tyrants have used down the ages for abrogating the safeguards which have existed in those countries to safeguard the liberties of those citizens. And so that brings me, my lords, to the role and responsibility in these circumstances of your lordship's house. Surely, if your lordship's house has any role and responsibility, it is to put a brake on the breach of those conventions, those precedents, and those procedures, which has undoubtedly taken place in the House of Commons. Because be under no illusion, what has happened in the House of Commons will set a precedent. It will set a precedent which may be followed in circumstances which would have a much more dire effect on our liberties than the issues which we are debating and discussing today. And if that precedent is to be tempered, the only body which can do it is your lordship's house. And that is why your lordship's house should today put a brake on the breach of those conventions, those precedents, and those procedures, and should vote for my noble friend's amendment.
My lords, I have form in terms of speaking on emergency
procedures whereby our legislation is put through in one day. Recently, and it is frequently the case, that legislation pertaining to Northern Ireland is shoved through Parliament in a day. And the government front bench will know that I objected strongly and raised the matter in this House, that I objected recently to several bills coming into the House to be dealt with in one day, when it was perfectly clear that they could have been dealt with in a different way. However, the one big difference was that both the government and the opposition supported those pieces of legislation. And if I were a promoter of this bill today, I would have to say to myself, we're at, what is it now, 14:26, and our proceedings started after questions at 11:30. And we're still on procedure, and we're going to be on procedure for quite some time. If I were a proposer of this bill, I would take the option that the noble Lord Strathclyde put forward, get on to the second reading and finish the business on Monday, when we'll have had time over the weekend to consider it. Exactly. I cannot see any reason why a rational person wouldn't do that. But more importantly, my Lords, I have found, I haven't been in this House that long, there's many people have been here far longer than me. However, I detect a complete change in the atmosphere in this place. Today has shown me we're becoming the nasty House, and I don't like it. We have continuous interruptions of speakers from a sedentary position. We've heckling, and we've some nasty comments coming from wherever they happen to come when a certain individual is expressing his or her views. Now, the irony of it all is that I accept, and I'm someone representing a party that recommended Remain in the referendum. And however, the people spoke in a referendum that this House and most of the members in it put their hands up for. And we accept the result of the referendum without question. It's over. Leavers and Remainers are gone. At least that's the way it should be. But what we're going to leave behind us if we go on the way we're going is the bitterness that we found in Northern Ireland after the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, or the bitterness that was left behind after the miners' strike. Things like that, personal relationships get damaged, and I think that's a great shame. I would have thought, and while technically the usual channels aren't functioning because it's not entirely clear who's the government and who's not the government today, but if I were promoting this bill, I would be working now to get us onto the second reading and finish the thing off on Monday. There will be no loss of impetus insofar as the European Union is concerned, because, ironically, I think this particular proposal that is coming forward in this bill actually does more harm than good. Because the fact of the matter is that the European Union will see a Prime Minister going in to meet them on Wednesday, basically, sadly, virtually on her hands and knees. And that's not something I want to see. And in particular, from where I come from, I want to see a deal. That is by far the best outcome for my part of the world, but I know that's not a view that's expressed everywhere. But I would appeal to the House to prevent this nastiness and the heckling and the gagging. Unfortunately, the procedures could have been dealt with differently if we'd have been operating across the chamber through the usual channels as we should. And I would urge members, before we really do irreparable damage to our House, that we focus on that, how we can deal with this matter in a proper way. I take Lord Newby's point. There is an emergency of a sort, and we do have to try and get our act together by Wednesday. I accept all of that. Leaving the finishing stages of this legislation to Monday is not going to make an iota of difference to that. But I do appreciate an appeal not to proceed with this nastiness It will not be repaired quickly if we continue the way we're going.
Will it be to the helpful...
MP has spoken with a good deal of sense. My understanding is that the usual channels had formally agreed to do this, to finish off this bill on Monday, and that arrangement was withdrawn during the course of yesterday. Now, my Lord, no Baroness is shaking her head, in which case, I've had 19 years' experience of dealing with process and procedure in this House, and one abiding rule is that once you don't involve usual channels, it all goes wrong, and that's exactly what has happened today. My Lords, can the noble Baroness, and I know she's about to speak, explain why it is so urgent that we must sit virtually all night in order to get this bill, when we could do what all the precedents set have done, which is to do the second reading today and finish off the remaining stages at the beginning of next week, and to ask the usual channels, the noble Lord McAvoy and my noble friend, the government chief whip here, to organise it. My Lords, that would get rid of any of the kind of the nastiness that my noble friend, Lord MP said, but my Lords, it would make a far more rational debate, and the bill would be completed. I recognise there's a majority for this bill in this House. This bill would be completed in plenty of time for whatever else happens next week.
My Lords, we're actually on the amendment about whether we should have a committee report, but I would like to draw the attention of the House to Mr. Steve Baker speaking late last night in the Commons. I don't know why I should pick on him at this particular moment. Oh, I hadn't noticed.
He's so self-effacing.
Who feels that, you know, they were looking forward to it coming to the Lordship's house, and that the bill would come here, and of course in the fervent hope that the Lordships will examine the bill line by line, give it good attention. But the hope was that we would get on and deal with the bill. And that's what this motion is about. Now, this is only about the amendment in the name of the Lord True, to which I rise to speak, who asked me first why did I not take an intervention from the noble Lord Strathclyde. Of course, I was moving a motion. And what normally happens is you move the motion, and then people stand up and they ask questions, they ask point of order, and at the end one comes back with a clarification. That seems to me the correct way to do it. On the particular issue of whether we should have a committee, of course we have got a committee report on this bill. But even had we not, the point of committees is to assist this House, not to stand in the way when something needs doing. Their members are also members of this House, and therefore can give their very wise and often learned, in the case of Constitutional Committee, advice direct to the House, so we can do it then. But, my Lords, the important thing, and the one I wanted to raise because I wasn't able to on the last amendment, is the idea that how awful it was that we were moving this rather than the government. But, of course, as I said at the beginning, it should have been the government that brought the bill to the House, because that was what the House had passed before, and we are doing it because that was not done. Noble Lady, the Leader of the House, said it's normally the government that tables private members' bills. Yeah, private members' bills. Yes, but they fail to do it, and we will do it when they do not. The Leader of the House is obviously in a difficult position. I think I will continue, if you don't mind. Yes, again. I'm sure you do, but I'd like to answer the point of the noble lady, the Leader of the House, that she made some time ago, and I haven't been able to. Because she is in a difficult position, I understand that. She's a member of the Cabinet, she's a member of the party, she's a member of the governing party, but she is also the Leader of the House. And in the absence of a Speaker with authority, though we do have a very authoritative Speaker, she also has to consider the whole House's interests. And I think it would have been her responsibility in that role to have brought forward this bill as was voted for before. Now, I just want to say, we've just been talked about a constitutional monstrosity, tearing up the Constitution. Constitutional vandalism. We are asking that this House considers a bill sent to us by the other House. And that is constitutional vandalism? My lords, as the noble Lord Newby has said, this country faces a national crisis. The people in the gallery, I'm sorry there are some there because I'm quite embarrassed that they're watching us. They must wonder what on earth is happening at a time of national crisis, that we are debating not the content of the bill, not the issues that have been raised by some speakers, but whether we should even consider the bill today. This is out of order in my view. In fact, I think it is shameful that this is being done. I find it shameful that the government is helping on this. I think the noble lord has spoken quite enough. We have heard from the noble lord. I think we know his views. So what I would... So we should not still be debating. We should not still be debating the content of the bill. We should not still be debating because we've not got on to that. We want a second reading. We can vote against the bill if we don't like the bill. That is the democratic way of dealing with a bill that you do not like. But to try and talk out the ability of us even to take the bill, I think is abuse of process. And I will not be supporting the amendment to my motion in the name of the noble Lord Rochford.
Since the noble lady doesn't like taking interventions, perhaps I'll have to make a speech. And it's going to be a very brief one. I always thought this House was about courtesy, but I've noticed that the Lord Tomlinson doesn't really agree. But never mind, Lord Tomlinson. Indeed, if I might digress slightly, when he rudely accused my predecessor in the seat of Blaby in the House of Commons of being in the House of Commons, being in Parliament too long, I note he first wanted to come to the House of Commons in 1966. That would be 53 years, and he hasn't done badly, although the electorate has kept throwing him out. But the point I'd like to make is, the noble Baroness Hayter particularly asked why the government had not put down a motion. It's quite straightforward, because the motion was not passed until 11:30 last night. How could the government possibly have put down a motion at 11:30 last night? It was passed by one vote. I regret to say that it was passed at all. There was never any certainty it would be passed, and it would have been extraordinary if my noble friends on the government bench had said, oh, we'll put it down just in case. That is not the way Parliament works. It has procedures, and that's the whole point of this amendment.
My lords, I beg to move that the question be now put.
I am instructed by order of the House to say that the motion that the question be now put is considered to be a most exceptional procedure, and the House will not accept it, save in circumstances where it is felt to be the only means of ensuring the proper conduct of the business of the House. Further, if a member who seeks to move it persists in his intention, the practice of the House is that the question on the motion is put without debate. Does the noble lord still wish to move the closure?
I do persist.
The question is that the question be now put. As many of that opinion will say content. Content. The contrary not content.
Not content.
Clear the bar.